Humanity is dead. The myth that Western countries cared about human rights and rule based international order has become a thing of the past. We now know that the West only cares about victims of genocide if they are whites. So called media outlets such as the BBC, the New York Times, and the Guardian, who fooled us all these years and decades that they were the voice of the voiceless, have shown their true colors in the last 18 months or so. We now know that they are nothing but propaganda outlets serving the interests of their white Zionist masters. I've never felt so helpless in my life. The barbaric murder of 15 UN paramedics by Israeli terrorists in Gaza in the last few days was a new low. What's worse is the lack of outrage in the West over the latest act of barbarism by war criminal Netanyahu and his medieval gang. Propaganda outlets masquerading as media organizations that devoted hours of coverage on the fake claims of Hamas men beheading Israeli babies haven't really bothered to register their outrage on the slaughtering of 15 UN paramedics. Yes, they worked for the United Nations. And yet, there is absolutely no discussion on the BBC, no debate on Sky News, no special program on the CNN, no provocative headlines on either The Guardian or the New York Times. This is how the BBC covered this story this morning. Its representative, Yolande Nell, she said that there were allegations of apparent war crimes against Israel.
Our correspondent Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem and has been following developments.
Yeah, so we've got the UN calling for a full investigation into exactly what happened back on the 23rd of March. That's where these 15 people were killed in Rafah, in the very south of Gaza. And really, this is continuing to generate so much controversy. You have, on the one hand, these allegations that Israel has committed an apparent war crime, a clear breach of international humanitarian law. But the Israeli military, in its latest statement, has been stressing that these were vehicles that it says were acting suspiciously and appeared to pose a direct threat to Israeli forces who were operating in the area.
Can you imagine the care she would have taken in writing this script? Then last night, an upright BBC reporter, Tom Bateman, posed this question to the State Department spokesperson. And her response? Hamas is responsible. And when Tom decided to challenge her brazen dishonesty, she cut him off.
On Gaza, the UN's Humanitarian Affairs Office has said that 15 paramedics, civil defence and a UN worker were killed, in their words, one by one by the IDF. They have dug bodies up, they said, in a shallow grave that have been gathered up, and also vehicles in the sand. Have you got any assessment of what might have happened, and given the potential use of American weapons, is there any assessment of whether or not this complied with international law?
Well, I can tell you that for too long, Hamas has abused civilian infrastructure, cynically using it to shield themselves. Hamas's actions have caused humanitarians to be caught in the crossfire. The use of civilians or civilian objects to shield or impede military operations is itself a violation of international humanitarian law. And of course, we expect all parties on the ground to comply with international humanitarian law.
But this is specifically a question on it's a question about accounting and accountability, given that it may have been the use of US weapons. So it's a question about the State Department rather than Hamas. Is there any action to
Well,
assess?
every single thing that is happening in Gaza is happening because of Hamas. Every single dynamic. I'll say again, I've said it, I think, in every briefing. All of this could stop in a moment if Hamas returned all the hostages and the hostage bodies they are still holding and put down its weapons. There is one entity that could stop it for everyone in a moment, and that is Hamas. All loss of life is regrettable. It's key, obviously. Whoever it is, wherever they live, And this has been the nature of what fuels Secretary Rubio and President Trump in their willingness to expend this kind of capital early on in this term to make a difference and to change the situation. So I think that is the one thing that remains clear in all of this, which is all for all of us, which is why we work to stop it.
I know that's
a horrible dynamic. Yes, Humaira.
Jonathan Wittol is the head of the UN's humanitarian agency in Gaza. He said, and I quote, "It's an absolute horror what has happened here." End of quote. This comes at a time when Israeli terrorists have mercilessly slaughtered close to 1,000 Palestinians in the last 1 week or so, with an overwhelming majority of them being children. Since these children are not white or Europeans, they don't enjoy the same human rights as those living in Europe or America. What more evidence do you need to prove that Western countries' political class and media are equal participants in the ongoing genocide in Gaza? Up to 2 million people in Gaza have been forced to starve by Israeli terrorists for over a month now. Food items are rotting at the Gaza border since Israel wouldn't let them enter Gaza. How is a rogue regime of Netanyahu allowed to act in such a fashion with impunity? That's because he enjoys the blessings of the US, the UK, the EU, Australia, and Canada. Slave Arab countries, they do not matter, as they have truly surrendered their self-respect to their Zionist masters. Turkey has no problem in carrying out trades with Israel. Jordan, Egypt, UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia like to enjoy the sight of Palestinians starving to death. I've never seen bigger cowards than these Arabs and other Muslim countries. Pakistan, a nuclear country, has become irrelevant on a global stage. They are only good at corruption and killing each other. A friend of mine told me yesterday that he feels like spitting on the rulers of these Arab and Muslim countries. This may sound strong, but I can't blame him for his outburst. Put yourself into the shoes of Palestinians. What if a rogue country bombs day and night to kill hundreds and thousands of people where you live, either the US or the UK? They bomb hospitals and burn you alive when you are sleeping in tents on the day of your biggest festival, let's say Christmas or Easter. They kill your loved ones, your children, as they are praying or visiting their loved ones. Can you imagine the global outrage? Do you think that rogue country would escape the wrath of America or the UK? But Israeli terrorists have been doing precisely this in Gaza. They killed and maimed children and babies on the day of Eid. They starved them in their holy month of Ramadan. These medieval barbarians disconnected the electric supply and made the only functioning water desalination plant dysfunctional. And the world is silent. Instead, Hamas must be blamed. Shame on the West. Shame on Western media outlets. And shame on Arab and Muslim countries. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you too think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. The details are there in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.